If you were to take the 10 actors who have made the highest US gross as a major character across all their movies, how many of them were in Avengers Endgame? Out of the top 10.
Top 10 actors.
Who have made the most money across all their movies in which they had a major role.
I'm going to go bold.
He's going bold.
I'm going bold. I'm going to say 1. Robert Downey Jr.
Reid, I'm going to be honest with you. The answer is 7. 7 of those actors were in Avengers Endgame. I didn't pull up the exact list.
I'm pretty close.
It's Samuel L. Jackson, it's Chris Pratt, it's Zoe Saldana. You just go down the list. It is Robert Downey Jr.
A lot of people in that movie.
There's a lot of people in that movie. Now, for some secret special bonus points, can you name any of the 3 that aren't on that list?
Top highest grossing, Tom Hanks.
Yes, that's one of the 3.
George Clooney.
Nope. He's out of there.
Ryan Reynolds.
Mm-mm.
Ryan Gosling.
Nope. A little more mainstream than that.
Doing pretty
Think
good.
of the movies that made all the money.
Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
And one more?
The last one's kind of tough unless you remember the movies that make all the money.
Caprio?
No, those aren't the movies that make all the money.
He's in like Titanic.
Yeah, he was.
Okay, who is it?
The last one is Harrison Ford.
Oh yeah, they made all the money.
Made all the money.
he did the 2 that made all the money. We are back in the green corner, and this week, continuing our trend of talking about movies that no one has seen. This movie is more so a movie that no one has seen than even our last movie, I think, arguably. There's probably a cult following for it, but we watched SLC Punk. This was your choice. This is the film from 1998. So tell us why we watched SLC Punk, Avery.
So SLC, or Salt Lake City Punk, which is the SLC. Also, there's an exclamation point at the end. That's very important. Tell your kids. SLC Punk was a movie recommended to me by my brother a very long time ago, actually. It was one of his favorites. This was kind of when we weren't talking as much, and I always meant to watch it, and I never got around to it. I think it was very relevant to his experience as a punk that grew up in a small town where not much was going on. So I think he identified largely with the main character. So that was one big reason why I picked it. I also picked it because, like I would imagine you and much of our audience, I don't know where Matthew Lillard came from and why he's famous. I didn't think they just found him to play Shaggy.
The only thing I like better than an eggplant burger is a chocolate-covered eggplant burger.
Matthew Lillard led this movie called SLC Punk in 1998, where he shouldered the entire movie, like Atlas, has almost all the dialogue, and his emotional reactions to scenes and his journey are the entire movie, and by all accounts, it went very well. What were your thoughts on SLC Punk?
Yeah, I loved this movie.
You loved this movie.
Which surprised myself, because I really had nothing going into this movie that drew me to it, right? I'm not into punk music. I don't really know anything about Salt Lake City, outside of some recent media we've consumed about Salt Lake City and Mormonism, like Under the Banner of Heaven, which is a great show. Some other Netflix true crime documentary stuff I've watched. So I was kind of aware of Salt Lake City as this place where the Mormons are. So it's got that conservative angle. This movie was not made for me in the slightest. Like you said, it was probably your brother is probably the target audience. I was not, and I loved it.
Right.
And we'll get into it, but this is a movie. It's a slice of life. It's a coming of age movie. But every single scene in this movie serves the movie's central theme. Mm-hmm. And that's not something you typically get from a slice of life movie. There's a lot of meandering in slice of life movies, and this movie meanders. This movie meanders all over the place and does silly stuff, but every single moment of the screen serves the greater theme and serves the narrative and builds our characters. And it's just this tight 90-minute movie that I absolutely loved, even though I'm definitely not the target audience.
That's interesting. So it seems like you enjoyed the movie, I would say, more than I did. I mean, I liked it. There were parts of the movie I really liked. Matthew Lillard's journey, as his character's name is Steve-O, is very interesting to me. And in a lot of ways, this movie is similar to kind of one of those Greek epics in its structure, in that it is a character bouncing from scene to scene, sort of meeting people that illustrate his flaws, show contrast, cause him to grow and evolve and reevaluate until he kind of completes his journey towards the end. I thought that part of it was great, and I think a big part of that was because this is largely autobiographical from the director, which we'll talk about. But as good as I think the script was and the idea of the movie, and I completely agree with all the points you made, I do think some parts of the movie were held up for me by what I would go as far as to call inept directing. I think there were a couple of scenes that could have been great that I watch. I'm so very sorry, James Maradino. I have a lot of good things to say, but there were a couple of scenes that I felt were really held back, and they were really important scenes. And there was a couple of times when I just kind of went, "Oh, you missed on that one."
Okay.
And I'll get into it. And I think it was creatively directed. I think there were a lot of very interesting choices made, but some of those just fundamentals of how to make a scene land, I think were missed at some very important junctures for me, which I think contributed partially to why this movie maybe didn't have a more widespread audience, despite being really creative and having a lot of amazing elements.
To be an anarchist in Salt Lake City was certainly no easy task, especially in 1985.
So let's jump into this, because this movie opens with our heroes, Steve-O and Heroin Bob, the greatest names ever, beating up rednecks in Salt Lake City.
It was very comedic. There's like a voiceover where there's just these two guys looking over the city. We'll show it. And it's Steve-O describing how they don't like rednecks. And I assumed in this scene that they were kind of setting up some larger conflict. And then the second the voiceover ends, Steve-O and Heroin Bob just run onto the screen, hit them with clubs. It's fantastic. Yeah. Very well done.
What could I say? We weren't much more than a couple of young punks.
We jump into the credits. The credit sequence for this movie is brilliant. The credit sequence for this is basically album art, but with, I don't know if they're all fake albums or if they're real albums, but they've changed how they look.
It almost doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It's like punk albums, but our cast credits are put on them like album cover names, and it's awesome. This would have taken like quite a bit of time. This is like a labor of love to go through this.
They didn't have Marvel's credits department to work on this. This guy had to like draw all these.
They did have someone from Marvel on this, which I'm going to get into later. Stay tuned, because there's a weird twist in this one. You don't even know this.
Very excited.
We're introduced to Steve-O and Heroin Bob. Steve-O's our main character, played by Matthew Lillard. Heroin Bob is played by Michael A. Gurgion, who has done a lot of TV stuff. Like a
lot of like artsy stuff.
Yeah.
He seems like he's had a good little career for himself.
He's a working actor, but no big breakout roles. And Heroin Bob is named Heroin Bob because he doesn't like drugs and he doesn't like needles. And the only drugs he does is beer and cigarettes.
Yeah.
He drank and he smoked cigarettes, but that's it. He'd say,
"You know that you guys do? You're yourselves up, man."
And the movie opens with Heroin Bob doing his best taxi driver impression in both the way he looks and literally looking himself in the mirror, and then punching himself and infecting his hand.
Absolutely destroying his hand in a defiant act of youthful rebellion, pure punk. And then a hard cut to him passing out in a Wendy's.
Yes.
Is he gonna be okay?
Oh, yeah, he'll be fine, I'm sure. Thank you, though.
And then going to the hospital for his incredibly infected hand.
His hand is straight out of a horror movie.
Yeah.
It is like this black mass.
What the heck did we do here? I think that wound's the most infected thing I've ever seen.
I hate doctors, man.
I think they even say they like named a disease after him at one point when he's in the hospital.
Leading to one of my favorite lines later in the movie when they ask how he's doing and the nurse says, "Have you seen The Exorcist?"
Yes.
Have you seen The Exorcist?
Yeah.
Did you like it?
He ends up in the hospital, and this basically starts some flashbacks where Steve-O tells us about our characters. So we get our formal introduction to Heroin Bob. The introduction of his character is really just that he hates drugs. Yep. And then in the flashback to Heroin Bob, he then tells another flashback within the flashback to their friend Sean, who was dealing acid. Cops tried to bust him. He ran away, accidentally ran through a sprinkler system, and the water from the sprinkler melted the acid in his pocket into his thigh, getting into his bloodstream, causing him to get high on acid and overdose and basically melt his brain.
Ends up chasing his mom around the kitchen with a knife, and it's this bafflingly weird Twin Peaks David Lynch scene. There's like a little guy in a devil costume, And it's played very comedically. It's a hilarious scene.
Yeah. I mean, this is a comedy. The whole movie is a comedy. This is played for laughs, and it comes back later as not laughs. We see literally the acid melt into his thigh muscle in this like weird cross-section X-ray shot where immediately I'm like, you didn't have to do that, but you sure did it. And
Over 100 hits of acid dissolved into Sean's leg. Fried him.
I don't know if you caught this, but Sean is one of basically all of the actors in this movie who ended up having a surprisingly long career after this being their first credit. Sean is played by Devon Sawa, who probably his biggest role is as the guy from Final Destination, the first one. Also famously, he is the actor John Travolta is obsessed with in The Fanatic.
Moose is in the house?
That's the one. That's the one.
Wow.
Moose is in the house. Moose is in the house. Watch out. Watch out.
So the next flashback we get is Steve-O talking to his parents. This is one of my favorite scenes. It's a flashback.
Such a good scene.
Steve-O is coming out of high school. His parents want him to go into law. So we learn that Steve-O actually comes from a lot of money. His parents are extremely rich. His dad's a lawyer.
Cool. Thank you for giving us an hour of your time. Your mother and I found this to be rather important.
They're divorced, but they've come together to try to convince him to go to law school. Apparently he did very well in his pre-law test. They want him to go. And Steve-O gives this long, beautiful monologue that I wish I could play the whole thing here, explaining why going to college and getting a degree is not punk.
I am the future of this great nation, which you, Father, so arrogantly saved this world for.
And this is kind of our first glimpse into the philosophizing of Steve-O.
He moved from New York City, the mecca and hub of the cultural world, to Utah. Nowhere.
He gives a lot of narration in this movie and a lot of ideas about what it means to be punk.
But for the first time in my life, I'm 18 and I can say, F you!
And this is kind of the thesis for when he really believes it. This is when his belief system is 100% rock solid, that punk is legit, anarchy is the way of life.
Even here, it's nonsense. Like, he's just rambling nonsense about how things that he likes are punk, things that he doesn't like aren't punk. I loved the scene with the parents. It would have been so easy to make them the 80s parents. I already mentioned Footloose, and I will, but the Footloose parents, right?
Yeah.
The Ferris Bueller parents that are angry and, son, you're gonna follow the fence. But they don't. It's Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore is his dad. And he so adorably tries to get it. He tries to connect with him.
I was there. I went to Woodstock. Me and the guys had a lot of fun. We did our thing there. We got behind some causes, though.
I just want you to kind of think about what your future might be after this.
There's all these possibilities for you, Steven. Carry the torch now.
And meanwhile, Steve-O's sitting here with the giant mohawk and the leather jacket, and it's a wonderful scene.
And I think the beautiful moment is Steve-O storming out. His dad grabs him by the arm, and his dad says, Steve-O, son, I want you to know, I didn't sell out, I bought in.
Steven, I didn't sell out, son. I bought in. Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious. Like, I laughed when it happened, but it almost becomes the thesis for the movie.
Especially the thesis for their relationship. You keep that line in mind, dear viewer.
Write that down.
Write it down.
Jesus, darling, we sound like our parents.
Yeah. It's difficult, dear.
So we move on from that. Steve-O and Bob go to a punk concert. Steve-O meets Sandy, who is the girl he's kind of on and off again dating for the rest of the movie. They're hooking up at the concert. We're introduced kind of informally to the rest of our characters because in their gang of punks is Mike and Mark. And Mike is Jason Segel.
In basically his first role. Again, 2 roles before this, Man in Store and Frightened Boy.
Yeah, I think this is worth pointing out. This is Jason Segel. I would say arguably one of the biggest stars in this movie in terms of how their career eventually went. This is a couple years even before Freaks and Geeks, which is what a lot of people think of as his first thing. Heroin Bob runs on stage, takes the mic, a bouncer fights him, Mike runs up on stage, rescues Heroin Bob, the cops raid the place, everyone runs away, and then they all, including the people Heroin Bob beat up, end up at a hideout, hanging out in someone's house. I think maybe we learn later it's Chris's house, it doesn't matter. They're hanging out and they're chilling.
The point of at least the first 2/3 of the movie is not a cohesive narrative. It's a character piece. It's Matthew Lillard, it's Steve-O establishing kind of who he is, what his morals are, kind of where his head's at, like setting up the character and the journey that he's about to go on. And it's bouncing between all of these different little character moments to set up all of his friends and gang for the eventual denouement of the final third.
Yeah.
So, too tame for you British types, or?
Master blatant violent.
Thank you.
And within this flashback, there's a mall scene.
I love the mall scene.
So he's this is probably the biggest philosophizing that Steve-O gives.
England was nothing more than a big f***ing American state, like North Dakota or Canada.
Full fourth wall break. Steve-O is looking at the camera. There's some really interesting camera work where they kind of get under him. There's like spit flying. It's whipping around his head as he's talking about, oh, British punk, American punk, the system, order, just complete circular nonsense. But it's just so much fun to watch Matthew Lillard just chew on this scene.
Hey, mistress, do you fancy a shag?
And this is where it establishes the theme of posers. This idea that there are people that dress like punk, but they just do it for fashion. They're not real punk. And the worst of those are the ones who are into UK punk. Because UK punk's not real punk.
Posers. Anarchy in UK. What good is that to those of us in Utah, America?
And we get to the hospital. Because what I didn't realize is we were still all in flashbacks when I was watching this. So Heroin Bob is now checking out of the hospital for his hand being infected. I didn't realize we were in flashbacks. I thought all of this was happening after that. So my brain took a minute to be like, oh, those were all memories and things. So,
and I'll freely admit, I just didn't care.
Yeah.
I just, after like the second time, they just jumped presumably a year or two, but I'm just like, oh, whatever, it's fine. Some scene is happening. I get it. Let's just go with it.
Yeah.
These doctors can kiss my ass!
Oh, knock it off, tough guy, or I'll give you another shot.
Woman fucking hates me, man.
And now we get into the party, which, as you said earlier, the party kind of takes up the second act of the movie. They're at a party at Steve-O and Heroin Bob's house. Their house is basically an abandoned factory somewhere in Salt Lake City.
The sets are just great. They took some bombed out house, covered it in graffiti, and it's just, you get such this, it simultaneously is like, it seems like where punks would hang out, but it also still feels like Salt Lake City. You don't get the sense this is like it's very far from like a punk club in New York.
Yeah.
It's clearly like this crappy building out in a field where it's like snowy around and they all had to like walk out there.
Yeah. So that's their house, is this place. They're having this party, and during this party we get lots of flashbacks. We're introduced to Trish.
I am Aladdin and this is my lamp. I wished for you and here you are.
Who is the main love interest for Heroin Bob, played by...
Annabeth Gish is her name. I recognize her most from Sons of Anarchy in the later seasons. She plays Celia Jerry.
But she's another one of these people because she's also a collaborator of Mike Flanagan. She was on Haunting of Hill House. Yeah. She was in Midnight Mass. She's also in Severance recently. She's had a very long and successful career of playing smaller roles.
And same thing. She 3 roles, then this, then she got big.
So we're introduced to Trish. We then get our proper introduction to Mike, who is Jason Segel. So Mike is this crazy guy.
Just this fantastic character where he's part of the gang, but he's this insane guy who's just dressed like a nerd, and just nothing else lines up with Steve-O and Heroin Bob at all. He wears like polos, he's got glasses. Basically all he does is stand there like this until he gets to break something or hit someone.
Yeah. And Steve-O insists that this guy is real punk. This guy's real punk. Meanwhile, I think he's just a crazy guy.
This guy looks like a geek, but his name's Mike. He's one of the most hardcore guys in the scene.
He's kind of weirdly protective in like a cute way. He's like they're Amos from The Expanse, like a little bit.
We then get introduced to Mark.
Mark was a lot of the movie, and he was a great character. And did you recognize him right away?
Of course, recognized it.
So this was Till Schweiger, who played Hugo Stiglitz in Inglourious Bastards, most famously. And I did look this up. This, I think, was his first English movie. He had shot a bunch in Germany before. He was like a major German actor. And he had worked with, in fact, the cinematographer for this movie, which is a weird connection. I looked up the cinematographer because the cinematography was so good. So many of the shots were fantastic. If you go and look it up, a lot of that guy's earlier credits were Till Schweiger German movies.
So they came over together.
I couldn't find anything on how this connection happened online.
But be careful, that stuff can make you stupid.
Yo!
More stupid than you already are.
That's their gang, is Mike and Mark. So Mark they're at his house, and it's both violent and funny. They're going around and he's showing them all his stuff.
7 settings for optimum comfort, all of which I would gladly show you now.
There's a really funny sequence on the waterbed.
Normal waterbed goes like this. Lots of waves. Funny thing is, this one doesn't have any waves.
But that in fact is such a fancy waterbed, it's just a regular bed again.
Why didn't you just buy a normal mattress that doesn't have waves?
He then gets it in his head, Mark does, that Heroin Bob stole his weed and pulls out the most comically large pistol I may have ever seen.
The Jack Nicholson Joker pistol. This thing is like
a pistol that would have a little flag come out the end as a gag gift. That's what this is. He gets it in his head that Heroin Bob must have stolen his weed, threatens him at gunpoint. They resolve it, but the whole time you're like, he might shoot him.
Yeah.
I don't know where this movie's gonna go.
Kind of in retrospect, the point to me of Mark as a character was he was an actual embodiment of what Steve-O was pretending to be into, what Steve-O thought he was into. Mark is rich because his entire family died in a plane crash.
And something came through that plane and cut my mother's head off.
So they establish Mark has unlimited money, he has no loved ones, he can't leave Salt Lake City because there's a warrant out for his arrest. He's just selling drugs to teenagers and hanging out with them because he's bored. Yeah. He's actually completely anarchistic, nihilistic, nothing matters, no rules, no systems. And it's terrifying to Steve-O and Heroin Bob.
Yeah, it's terrifying to them, even though it's the embodiment of what they say they want.
Yeah.
Pure nihilism, pure anarchy.
Hey, did I scare you?
It did scare me.
There is a scene in this segment that made me cry laugh. And that is when Mark gets the idea they're gonna hotwire a car. He doesn't need to.
Completely out of nowhere, he just decides, let's go steal a car.
Yeah. He wants to sink it, so he drives it off a cliff into presumably the Salt Lake.
Great Salt Lake,
The Great Salt Lake, so it floats on top of the water.
Sink, you fool!
And there's this like comedy shot of the car floating perfectly, like almost wheels out.
Hey, why won't she sink?
Well, it's because it's the Great Salt Lake.
And Mark is furious. He's like, why isn't it sinking?
The water's denser. Things float on.
Saltiest lake in the world. It makes things buoyant, you know? It floats.
So the party segment ends at this point because the rednecks attack. The rednecks are back. They break up the party. They run in and fight people. And there is a hilarious cutaway slideshow. Right. Steve-O gives us like a school presentation on violence and how fighting is not punk and justifies why it's okay to fight the rednecks. And there's this beautiful, convoluted explanation that fighting is a tool of war, which is a tool of fascists. So a real punk wouldn't fight, because that's what the fascists do.
We fight for what we stand for, chaos.
But it's okay to fight rednecks.
But fighting is a structure. Fighting is to establish power. Power is government, and government is not anarchy.
Basically, everything up to this point is just kind of setting the stage and building everyone as characters. And there's this quick flip where now it's challenged. Heroin Bob and Steve-O are now realizing that this may not be what they want to do for the rest of their life. Cracks are forming and the doubt is seeping in, and it just builds and builds a little more, basically every scene from here on out.
One point they say, what do you do when your foundation is breaking?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what this is.
What do you do when your foundation falls apart? I don't know. They'll teach you that in school.
Trish and Bob go off on their own, and Steve-O goes off to meet his dad, which is a wonderful scene where him and his dad sit in the car. His dad has actually, on Steve-O's behalf, applied to Harvard Law and got him in. And Steve-O, I would say, is more receptive to this now than at the beginning of the movie. He's still spouting his punk ideology, but he seems more open-minded to it than when his dad first proposed it.
They're starting to kind of meet in the middle, because not only is Steve-O more receptive and there's a lot less conflict between them, but his dad is also set up as closer to Steve-O, because by this time, you know, not only is the dad divorced, he's like sleeping around with younger women. He's driving this like midlife crisis mobile. He's cheating on entrance exams. You really start to get, remember that line I told you to write down?
You keep that line in mind, dear viewer. Write that down. Write it down.
I didn't sell out, I bought in. This is the illustration of that.
I didn't sell out, son. I bought in.
You really get kind of the connection between them. They're talking like people, and they're actually listening to each other. I thought it was just great.
And Steve-O makes a joke that you're a fascist, Dad, because you drive a Volkswagen, a German car. And the dad laughs along. It's like they both know that's a silly comment.
Volkswagen, you know, right? For the people.
But now they kind of both know it's a joke. And I actually think in this scene, they broke.
Yeah, I thought that too.
Who designed it? Who made that possible? Let me give you a hint. Adolf Hitler.
It's just a car!
Like, I can see the actors themselves are laughing at it, but clearly they chose to keep it in because it's supposed to be this moment of love.
Created on the blood and the pain of your people.
Let me take you to lunch.
Okay.
Huh?
He genuinely does get it. He also wants to live life the way he wants to against the things he thinks are valuable, the things he loves. But you need to buy into the system a little bit.
Yeah.
You need to compromise in some ways.
And this is far from the only scene that goes back and recontextualizes something that was just kind of a one-off funny scene at the start. It's a funny scene. Dad says go to Harvard Law and he sees in a mohawk. Funny scene. And then this goes back and recontextualizes it as the dad never stopped caring about him. They never stopped having a relationship. They obviously were close when they were younger. And it comes full circle in a cool way. There's a lot of those kind of echoes between the first and third acts.
Hey, what are you staring at? Did you get a good picture?
We then meet up with Sean again. Sean, who had the acid trip. Steve-O's walking with Sandy, and Sean is now homeless. And we kind of said this earlier. The first time we meet Sean, it's played for laughs. The sequence with him
holding the acid trip.
Yeah, and holding his mom at knife point and thinking there's a devil in the house. It's funny at the beginning of the movie. Now we kind of see the dark side of that, which is that, no, this is a person who has like a real mental problem, probably needs to be supported, maybe in an institution, and is not being cared for. So he's on the street begging for money. And Steve-O runs into him and appears to genuinely feel remorse and like sadness that this person has had this turn in life.
It's the most human moment from Steve-O so far, except maybe breaking down in the car, where there's this great scene that is both funny and kind of touching. This great little line where Steve-O just says like, "Oh, Sean, you used to hang out with me and Harold and Bob. It's me, Steve-O. The three of us used to hang out." And Sean goes like, "Bob."
Bob! No, Steve-O! Steve-O!
And it feels like this experience really resonates with Steve-O. He gets like genuinely upset and clearly remorseful for Sean. He decides to go to the park and drop acid with Sandy. I could totally see a movie doing this scene where you go to the park and drop acid and it's this fun, wacky adventure and you do like Beatles psychedelic imagery, but it's not. It's like a nightmare. And clearly his world is like falling apart at this point.
This would be kind of one of the stumbles that I think a better director might have done a little better with. I got it. I got the point that it was supposed to be a bad trip and that they were upset. The actual visuals of the scene, I thought it kind of dragged and was just kind of like, I don't really know what we're doing here. It was not super effective for me, but the message was delivered.
And I need to brag about this scene because they go up onto a cliff overlooking Salt Lake City, and as part of the acid trip, see an explosion, like the whole city blowing up as part of their hallucination. And I was sitting there watching the movie going, you know what, that looks a lot like Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And I looked up the trivia after I watched this, and lo and behold, that scene sampled the explosion from Terminator 2 Judgment Day. So,
you called that out live.
I don't want to brag.
I'll give it up.
But I am going to brag that I've watched Terminator 2 Judgment Day probably 5 million times because we had it on VHS when I was a kid. So my brain was like, I've seen this explosion before.
Come with me if you want to live.
So we get to a party at Chris's house, and basically Steve-O runs into a girl who we met earlier in the movie.
Chris's sister, I think.
Yeah, Chris's sister.
Because there's this little line of him introducing her at the first party. She doesn't get her own flashback. But then when we meet her again, he's like, yeah, remember the girl I said this about? Yeah. I'm like, oh, yeah.
You remember, right? It's Jen. Jen.
Steve-O, how you doing?
So he meets her again. She's kind of all over the place and seems like she's maybe on drugs or something. She explains that she was on medication and stopped taking it because her brother said to stop taking it.
Right.
And now she feels free and she feels like she's no longer being controlled. And, you know, that could be pretty punk to be free and not under the control of big pharmaceuticals. But Steve-O can see she's not doing well and is clearly like perturbed that this young girl is off of her doctor prescribed medicine for whatever kind of issues she's having.
In the first half hour of this movie, if they do that scene, she, you know, I don't know, runs around and like farts on a police car or something, and it's all comedy. But here it's completely like, oh no, this woman is in serious trouble.
He goes downstairs at the party to Chris's room, who's the brother of this girl who hosts the party. He has this conversation, and he does bring up that he's like, why'd you tell your sister to go off for medicine? Like, she doesn't seem like she's doing super well.
Why'd you tell Jennifer to get off her medication?
Yeah, I think this is sort of another big step in the chain of Steve-O becoming too smart, or realizing he's too smart for this world, is that they set Chris up as this duel of the minds. Steve-O, I love debating with him.
And so we started our debate. This was our custom. He believed in structure, I believed in chaos.
Steve-O's just kind of realizing this guy's just spewing nonsense, and this is dumb, and this is just some stoner. And
this was the cycle. It was getting old. No, I was feeling old.
There's a scene that happens a little bit later with another character that I think there's this really cool contrast with this conversation with Chris. It's very similar framing, where Steve-O's having a debate about kind of punk ideology, about his core ideology. And this conversation with Chris, they're kind of going back and forth, these long-winded platitudes, and Steve-O kind of realizes that they're just not saying anything, and this is just nonsense. And then the second conversation with Brandy, who we'll meet later, in like 2 lines, she just kind of like skewers his entire ideology and just like really makes him rethink. And I just thought that those 2 scenes they formed a really cool little contrast.
Structure. An infant is born. A child. Yeah. A child, exactly.
This is another deep cut that I need to talk about. This movie has a lot of parallels with Superbad. I think it's not a stretch. They're both coming of age movies. Superbad, they want to get laid and have a big crazy party before they graduate. And it's 2 characters, that's their journey. In the end, they realize friendship's all that really matters. SLC Punk, very similar, but instead of having sex and partying, it's just punk lifestyle.
Living punk.
But the moment in this, I think this scene with Chris in the basement is the turning point in SLC Punk, where he's like, this is probably not the life for me.
Yeah.
Or this is not quite right.
It's maybe like the sharpest turn in the
scene in Superbad, around this point in the movie, they're at a party. They finally get into like an adult party where there's lots of free booze, there's drugs, and it is not what they expect, and they're not having a good time. Right. And it's kind of the sobering point in the movie where they realize, we need to get out of here. This is not what we expected. And the highlight of that part in Superbad is that Michael Cera's character is brought into a side room accidentally where people are doing cocaine, and they mistake him for someone named Jimmy's brother, who's supposed to be a beautiful singer, and they make him sing These Eyes. The guy who says he's Jimmy's brother and wants him to sing is the same actor who plays Chris in SLC Punk.
Remember? He's Jimmy's brother, the guy, the singer.
Come on.
So literally the exact same guy in both movies serves the same narrative device of making our characters realize, like, I gotta get out of here.
Did you watch Superbad like the day before?
I haven't seen Superbad in like at least 5 years. Mike, Jason Segel, gets into college and decides, he says, I'm out. I gotta leave the life. I'm going to college.
I want to save the rainforests, you know?
He wants to save the rainforests.
Somebody's got to fight for them.
He's just gone. He has like 8 lines, Jason Segel does.
And there's a scene with Trish immediately after this on the water's edge. So they're at a salt flat. They pulled their van up there. Trish and Bob are concerned about Steve-O. They want him to be happy. They found that they have found happiness with each other. They want him to have that. And it's kind of this is a beautiful scene visually. I wanted to point out the cinematography here is...
It's stunning. So they're out on this salt flat. It's like completely blue sky and ground. And this is, I think, around the point where you don't really get much more voiceover from Steve-O.
Yeah, you're probably right.
There's a little more, but it's around here. And maybe this is a stretch a little bit, but I kind of took that on reflection to be, he stopped showing off for no audience, right? Because we kind of served as, you know, living the punk lifestyle. He's wearing these ridiculous clothes. He's embodying all these ideals. For who, right? For the audience, which is us. And there's kind of, as he stops buying in and his personality stops being about showing off and proving that he's punk, he stops breaking the fourth wall. He stops talking directly to us.
We get a beautiful little scene where they go to visit Heroin Bob's dad for his dad's birthday. They've addressed earlier on that Heroin Bob's dad is estranged from him.
Not great.
So Heroin Bob's dad lives in a shack. He's crazy. He doesn't recognize them. They tried to bring him a present or a cake or something, and he runs them off with a shotgun. Yeah. And you really feel for Heroin Bob. We haven't talked a lot about him, but his performance, he doesn't have a ton of dialogue to do. Like the script.
He's got a great face.
He's got a great face physically.
He's telling the story all the time.
He endears you. You are endeared to Heroin Bob throughout the whole movie. Like, you really are rooting for him. He has this kind of sad puppy dog thing, even though he looks like Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver. Yeah. He kind of, you want to protect him.
Yeah.
You think Steve-O wants to protect him. So when they're driving away from this failed happy birthday, they have this really beautiful moment where they almost break down to each other.
Yeah.
They kind of let their guard down.
And they're almost real people.
Almost real people.
Sorry.
Or Heroin Bob apologizes for his dad, and Steve was like, you don't have to say sorry to me. Like, I'm sorry that that's the experience you just had.
You're my friend, that's all. I'm sorry.
Steve-O set up with Brandy. You talked about this earlier. This is Trish's friend. They go to Brandy's party. Steve-O and Brandy are talking, and she just pokes holes in his entire ideology. Yeah. She says, dressing the way you do, why do you do it? You know, you kind of look ugly. And he's like, oh, you think I look ugly? Like, he wants her to like him.
Why do you go out of your way to look like a bum?
I look like a bum?
And Matthew Lillard's performance in this scene is stellar. But then when he's talking to Brandy on the couch in this very nice suburban house to this nice girl who's not part of the punk scene at all, he looks so uncomfortable. He's literally sitting there like, I don't want to be in this hair. I don't want you to look at me. I don't want to be a part of this anymore.
I want you to like see me the way my parents see me.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. And yeah, I loved this scene.
You look like you're wearing a uniform. I mean, you look like a punk. That's not rebellion. That's fashion.
Then Heroin Bob is not feeling super well at the party. Someone offers him some pills to make him feel better.
And recall, his name's Heroin Bob. Ironically, because he doesn't do any drugs, including aspirin. All he does is beer and cigarettes. Yeah. He never takes any pills.
But he takes the pills. He has kind of a public freak out, probably partially fueled by the drugs, I assume. Yeah. He punches the mirror again, just like the beginning of the movie.
Little bookend there.
So Steve-O gets him out of the party. The party gets shut down. Steve-O's embarrassed in front of Brandy, but says, like, I'll call you tomorrow.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, okay.
So Steve-O gets Heroin Bob home, puts him to bed, and he's fine. He's just high. Mm-hmm. And when he wakes up in the morning, Heroin Bob is dead.
Yeah.
And you'd had this scene spoiled, correct?
I mentioned to you that, yeah, I had a major spoiler for this movie, and I didn't know, because I hadn't seen the rest of the movie, I didn't know how bad of a spoiler it would be. But yeah, I had seen the scene of Steve-O reacting to finding Heroin Bob dead. Really deflated this for me. And I'm curious to hear your reaction, because knowing it was coming took a lot of wind out of the sails for this little part, which should have been the climax of the movie.
After the whole movie is so frantically edited, it's got jump cuts, punk music playing over stuff, weird angles, very 90s.
A lot of color, yeah.
And this scene, the music cuts out, it's like dead silent.
Yeah.
And he drops to his knees, and there's just this long extended take of him crying over Heroin Bob. And it literally moved me to tears. And like, it really messed me up. Like I didn't expect to have an emotional reaction to this movie like this. There's a specific line he has where he's saying, I wasn't ready for this. Mm-hmm. And like, you're my only friend.
What am I going to do for a friend?
What am I going to do? And
please, I'm sorry.
Matthew Lillard, we'll talk about his performance at the end holistically for the whole movie, because I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
He floored me here. Like I was moved to tears. It really shook me. And it came out of nowhere. Like, this movie has moments of darkness with Mark, weird stuff with violence, but I didn't think the movie would actually go here. Okay. But it pulled it off, and it floored me.
I wasn't ready for this.
I'm really glad to hear that, because I didn't want to come in and be cynical, because, like, I will say, having that spoiled, and by the way, that's now spoiled for all of you lovely folks. So if you're going to go watch it, bummer, because you're going to do what I had. This is one of those fundamental scenes that I think could have been done better by a more experienced director.
Okay.
But it is really hard for me to be objective here.
We get Heroin Bob's funeral, and a flashback to kind of when Steve-O and Heroin Bob decided to be punk. It's a flashback to them. They're 14 years old. They're about to play Dungeons and Dragons in Steve-O's basement. I felt personally attacked because they're going to play Dungeons and Dragons and they're listening to Rush.
Yeah.
And Bob comes down and explains why that's so lame. And I'm like, I'm doing that like this week. But he explains how it's lame, puts on a punk cassette, and they sit there and listen to it and vibe. And that's clearly like that's when their love for punk started. And it establishes that they were being bullied.
Yeah.
They were like two kids who didn't have community, who were being bullied, and punk was an outlet for them. And it's not like I couldn't have guessed that. Like, it's kind of obvious that's where it was going. But it was a nice bookend to their relationship that showed why Bob influenced Steve-O so much. He brought him into a place where he actually felt comfortable.
And I think it's a really cool example of something you don't see done very often, or very often, of kind of the memento thing, of the climax being a prequel, right? The payoff being a prequel. So you're getting all these little moments of, like, you really do feel that Steve-O and Heroin Bob care about each other a ton through the whole movie. Yeah. They're very close friends, like way more so than with Mark or Mike or Trish or any of these other people. And that probably childhood friends. And you get little bits of that. You hear how they both aced college, even though they didn't care. They were all punk. And after getting all these little snippets and sort of getting to know them and watching them kind of admit that they're these smart, capable, like, people with feelings and real emotions, then you go back and kind of see when that was just all of who they were, like their authentic selves, the last time that they were actually being authentic. Yeah. It was great. It was so cool. It was a great payoff.
And up until this point in the movie, I thought Heroin Bob needed punk because his dad was the way he was. Steve-O chose it. And I was wrong. This flashback shows that even though Steve-O came from money, they were both bullied. They were both people that did not belong to a community, and they both needed punk. It doesn't matter that Steve-O came from money. They needed each other.
Yeah, what is it, Bob?
It's new.
So we're pretty much at the end of the movie. The last scene is Steve-O. This is very symbolic, with his head shaved at the funeral. I mean, that speaks for itself.
In a suit.
In a suit. Well, he was at the funeral, so.
Yeah, but I mean,
he might have worn like a crazy vest.
It is the first time in the movie he wears regular clothes.
And he says he's going to Harvard Law, and he says, this is not, I'm paraphrasing, but I can do more damage in the system than outside of it, and I guess I'm a poser.
Yeah.
I guess when all was said and done, I was nothing more than a goddamn trendy-ass poser.
And it's a beautiful ending, because I was ready for this movie to take the path of punk is fake, and punk is not real, and I need to give up on this dream.
Yeah.
But the stuff with his dad gives you hints that's not going to go that way. The idea that, like, wanting to be outside the system and be yourself and be happy is okay, but there's a compromise, and that's what he realized in the end. He's not giving up on the dream of punk. He still wants to fight the system, but he's going to do it as a lawyer, just like his dad, right? He's going to join society. I guess we said earlier the scene with his dad was the thesis for the movie.
You keep that line in mind, dear viewer. Write that down. Write it down.
He's going to buy in.
Yeah.
He's not going to sell out. He's going to buy in, and that's okay. And I found that really moving, like, even for myself. Like, this idea that becoming an adult and moving into this phase of our lives where we're not just partying all the time, we're not at university anymore. It's okay, and you can find, like, joy in the new things in life. And I was really moved by the ending.
That's a really cool call out. That specific line was not something that grabbed me, but that idea that it wasn't, he didn't just leave all of it behind. He didn't just become it wasn't totally unearned. It was very much like he just accepted what the evolution that he was going through.
Yeah.
And still included that punk phase as part of himself, but found a way to move forward and buy in.
Just a very poignant ending, and the movie ended and cut to credits, and this is when I decided I loved the movie. Because I'm like, that is a tight movie.
Yeah.
This movie felt to me like it was not even 60 minutes.
It was, yeah.
It was tight. This movie could have gone another 45 minutes and it shouldn't have, but movies will do that. This movie ended exactly when it should have. No fat on this movie. We're out of the plot. I want to just talk about anything we kind of didn't. I have a couple points I want to bring up about overall. But
and I do as well. So in my intro, I was a little bit critical, right? And I still feel that way. So when we sit here and we recount the plot elements and we talk about especially talk about some of the things we liked, some of the ideas, I think a lot of that came from the script, right? Came from this very good script that had all these payoffs and setups and kind of all these full circle moments. And I think a lot of these moments were really brilliant, and the story being told was very well thought out. It was tight.
Right.
I think that there was a lot of execution issues that aren't going to come across in this video, right? So I haven't been very critical thus far because I'm talking about the ideas. I'm talking about what the scene should have been, what it represented, what the idea that they were trying to communicate was. And I think, I'm not going to get too deep into the examples just because, it's my subjective opinion and I don't want to be overly critical of this movie, but I counted probably at least 10 times where a scene happened and I was like, oh, that was really kind of weird. I don't know if I got it. There's some weird decisions. There were some distracting bits. And then after I sat down and thought, I'm like, okay, I get what they were doing. That made a lot of sense and that was a cool idea. Right. So that's where I go back. I think James, lost it.
Who?
The director.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Yeah, James Marandang. You know what I'm
Marandino.
Marandino. James Marandino. Cut all that out. James Marandino.
It's all staying in.
This was a largely autobiographical movie, right? He actually was raised in Salt Lake City, was part of the punk community, was very smart, apparently, clearly, realized he had this artistic talent, kept punk part of himself. And I think that's why the story was so great. He was drawing from his real life. He did an amazing job of translating it into a relatable story and telling it through a movie lens. And I think there was a lot of creativity in the cinematography and he made some beautiful sets. But I just think that the fundamental parts of directing a movie and paying off a specific scene and even just like some of the blocking and like there was just some misses for me that I think a more experienced director would have done a better job with.
Yeah.
But given this guy's filmography, I can't be that critical.
There's a movie on there.
There's one thing I wanted to mention that we didn't touch on, and that's the use of music. So I'm not usually into music movies. And that's not usually when I end up watching a music movie that's supposed to be good, that people recommend, I will like it.
Right.
But I'm not drawn to music movies. I don't pick them off the shelf.
But you are very into scores.
I love music.
Yeah.
And I love movies with good music in them. But if a movie is about a specific music scene, I'm usually not attracted to it. And I don't know why. And that's what I wanted to say is that the music takes a back seat in this movie. Yeah. There is punk music in it. There's the one concert scene. Yeah. But other than that, it's really just about the characters. It's not about the punk music.
A lot of scenes where you would expect music to be playing, there's just no score, no music. And not even just like the big gut punch scenes. Some of just the regular scenes where you'd expect there to be like a punk song. There's nothing.
And I think that is serving the theme of the movie, which is that the fallacy of this lifestyle, it is a fallacy. Right. It's like, it's kind of saying like the people in this lifestyle and their lives and the things they're going through are more important than the music. The beginning of the movie does have a lot of punk music in it. And if you're a fan of punk music, I'm sure there's lots of bands featured in this that stand out. But as the movie goes on, that becomes less. As Steve-O loses his faith in punk, the music also starts disappearing.
Crisis of faith movie.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. This could be about religion. And I noticed there are two scenes in particular where instead of doing punk music, they use classical music. And they're both scenes where he is having a crisis of faith. One is the acid trip in the park.
Help me. I'm dying.
And one is the scene at the salt flat.
Nothing. Miles of nothing, just space.
Both of those play traditional classical music. And I think that is those are scenes that could have had punk music, especially the acid trip.
Those are two of the strongest moments of Steve-O grappling with, like very directly confronting the fact that he has evolved out of this lifestyle.
And they don't play punk music. It shows a separation from it. And eventually, as the movie goes on, the music's just gone all. We don't even have classical music. When Heroin Bob dies, it's dead silent.
Yeah.
So it's almost like as we evolve with Steve-O, the music leaves the movie. And I thought that was a really nice touch.
Somehow I got the grades, and now somehow I was accepted to a f***ing Ivy League school.
Let's go into our reviews. I think it's time. We've kind of already talked about a lot of the justifications for it. Who starts?
You start.
I start?
You start.
What do I start with, critical or personal?
Why don't we start with critical reviews?
My critical for SLC Punk is an A-.
That's an A-.
I think it's borderline for what it's trying to achieve, kind of perfect in terms of its niche. I'm not saying it's an actual perfect movie, but I think it's really good. The reason I gave it the A-, not just an A, is because of those pacing and editing issues, because I got lost so much in what is flashback and what is not. I think it's a fair criticism that you either need to clean that up and make it more obvious what is flashback, or the current narrative needs to be more driving so that it's more obvious when you're in flashback. But when both the flashback and the current are both just meandering slice of life, it's easy to get really lost in the muddiness of it. I'm giving my personal an A.
Okay.
This is a movie that I would recommend to people. I loved it. I think if this was a movie about a thing that I really cared about, I might be an A+.
Yeah.
But I think as someone who it's not the target audience, I like this movie as much as I possibly could have. That's basically how I think about it. So I'm giving it a solid A.
That is some high praise. I respect it. You're gonna get to know me. I'm gonna be pretty stingy with my A's throughout this series. I think critically, I'm gonna give this movie a B, and it's very much an average because I think this is an A to A+ script and idea and kind of story thread, and there are some definite D moments in it for me. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I mean, even a perfectly executed, fairly modest movie is not probably going to be an A or an A+ for me. I think you really got to blow me away on multiple levels to get up to an A or an A+. So I'm going to give this a B, which is kind of an aggregate score, and I think is fair. And then personally, I think I'm going to give it a B as well. I think that's about where it lives.
Tied.
I think it's tied. And for me, it's hard because it's an aggregate of a lot of things. I mentioned that it's a little difficult for me to be objective because I had the ending scene spoiled, and I think that took a lot of wind out of the sails for me, and ruined my enjoyment of what probably should have been the biggest hit of the movie. But I respect that it was well done, and honestly, I was really curious to hear your reaction because I couldn't get an unspoiled reaction. So hearing that it was well executed and that it did land for you knocks me up a few grades. I'll get into my MVP, and I'd love to be more creative, but sometimes you just have a 2016 Steph Curry situation, and it's Matthew Lillard. Matthew Lillard carried the movie. We just spent 10 minutes talking about it. He was incredible. Physical acting, dialogue. It's Matthew Lillard. He is the MVP. Good job, sir.
But this movie was like it was written for him, because when he needs to be overacting and chewing the scenery, the movie gives him the material. He's supposed to be doing that. He's like reading a manifesto, essentially.
In the middle of a mall while the camera spins around his head.
But when there's the quiet moments, he's really good. When he actually needs to bring the emotional gut punch, he does it. The vulnerability he brings, he actually achieves all of that perfectly. So I just need to say, I think he was amazing. I mean, I've heard he's really good in The Descendants, which I have not seen.
I have so much respect for her. She's an amazing woman.
The most recent thing I've seen him in was Twin Peaks Season 3, which I will talk about probably on every episode somehow. He is amazing in Twin Peaks Season 3 in a tiny part.
We were gonna scuba dive and drink mixed drinks on the beach.
It's really weird. I don't know. Maybe this is just what he wants to do. Maybe he's just enjoying making B movies, weird little roles, and doing presumably like Shakespeare performances on stage. It's, good for him. He seems like a wonderful guy. He is spectacular in this movie. He is 90% of why the movie works.
Yeah. I'm going to pick Randy Hiller, who is the casting director. There are two casting directors on this movie. There's Randy Hiller and Risa Abramon Garcia, who seem to work together because before this, they also worked together and cast Speed 2 Cruise Control.
Ooh.
But they seem to have split up after this. Randy Hiller went on to form Finn Hiller Casting with Finn, who's the last name of someone I don't remember, who cast, starting in 2000, their agency started, and they cast Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, as well as the Avengers. And Randy Hiller would then go on to cast all of the Disney live-action movies and currently sits as the Executive Vice President of Casting at Disney.
I didn't know you could be a casting prodigy, but clearly, well done, Randy.
So Randy, she saw something in all the people in SLC Punk, because this movie has star power that it doesn't need to. No. And every single person, like we said, went on to do at least something. Even Heroin Bob didn't become an A-lister, but he had a working career and he was great in this role.
It's a crazy, f***ed up world, and we're all just barely floating along.
So that's our show. That's a deep dive on the Green Corner. We highly recommend you check out SLC Punk. I mean, we spoiled the whole thing if you watched the whole thing along with us, but you know what? Check it out anyway. It's a damn good time. Next week's my pick.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure I already know what it's gonna be.
You don't know. I don't know. He knows.
You don't know. I know. It's gonna be another deep cut.
It's gonna be a lot of fun.
I'm gonna love with you. It's gonna be one you don't want to miss. It's gonna be a good time. And
well, thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. Episode 2 in the books.
Don't you live here?
Oh, that's fair enough.